An ex-con found an abandoned baby, never imagining it would lead him to his own lost child. The thought replayed in Ray Mercer's mind like a broken record as he stared at the bundle wrapped in a tattered blue blanket. Life had a cruel sense of irony, throwing this tiny, helpless creature into the path of perhaps the least qualified person to care for it. The baby couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. Its eyes, still that newborn slate blue, blinked up at him from the cardboard box someone had left beside the dumpster behind Ray's apartment building. A hastily scribbled note lay crumpled inside. "Please help him. I can't." 5 simple words. 5 words that threatened to collapse the fragile life Ray had managed to rebuild since his release 8 months ago. His hands trembled as he crouched beside the box, his breath forming small clouds in the December air. The temperature was dropping fast as evening settled over Chicago, painting the sky in bruised purples and grays. The baby squirmed, tiny fists punching at the cold, a whimper escaping its bluish lips. "Shit," Ray muttered, looking around the deserted alley. Nobody to take this problem off his hands. Nobody to save him from having to make a choice. 3 years in Stateville Correctional had taught Ray the dangers of choice. Choose wrong, like he had when he'd agreed to be the getaway driver for his brother's pharmacy robbery. And you lose everything. 3 years of concrete and steel and nightmares while his life crumbled outside. His wife filing for divorce. His own child growing up without him. Now this, with calloused fingers that felt too large, too rough for such a task. Ray reached into the box. The baby quieted immediately at his touch, those unfocused eyes seeming to find his face in the growing darkness. "I'm not the guy you want, kid," Ray whispered, his voice rough from years of prison yard shouting and the cigarettes he couldn't quite quit. "Trust me on that." But the Chicago wind cut sharp as a knife, and the baby's tiny body shivered against his palm. Ray closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him like a physical thing. Call the police and the kid disappears into the system. Walk away and, well, that wasn't really an option, was it? Not even for an ex-con with nothing to offer. Just for tonight, he told himself, gathering the bundle against his chest. Just until morning. The baby smelled of sour milk and something indefinably sweet beneath it. That newborn scent Ray hadn't experienced since his son was born. The memory hit him with unexpected force, making his throat tighten. When was the last time he'd held Mikey? The boy would be 7 now. 7 years old, and Ray had missed 4 of them. The baby nuzzled against his jacket, seeking warmth, seeking safety from the only person available to provide it. Ray zipped his jacket partially over the bundle and headed toward the back entrance of his building, his footsteps echoing in the empty alley. His 3rd-floor walk-up was hardly a sanctuary. A studio apartment with peeling paint, secondhand furniture, and the perpetual smell of the Thai restaurant downstairs. But it was warm, and it was his, the only place he'd been able to rent with his record. Ray placed the baby on his unmade bed, then stood back, running his hands through his close-cropped hair. What the hell did he know about caring for an infant? What did it need? Food? A doctor? His parole officer Martinez would have a field day with this. An abandoned baby in the possession of a convicted felon. It had all the makings of a parole violation, regardless of his intentions. The baby began to cry, a thin, reedy sound that filled the small apartment. Okay, Ray muttered, pacing the worn carpet. Let me think. The corner store 3 blocks over sold basic supplies. Milk, at least. But was regular milk even safe for a baby this young? Ray didn't know. His ex-wife had handled most of Mikey's care during those early months, her natural maternal instincts making Ray feel perpetually inadequate. The baby's cries intensified. Ray grabbed his wallet, checking inside. $63 to last until his next paycheck from the warehouse. He'd been saving for a used car, hoping reliable transportation might open up better job opportunities. Sorry, kid, he said, tucking the wallet back into his pocket. Looks like your timing just cost me a set of wheels. He fashioned a makeshift diaper from a clean t-shirt, wrapping it as best he could remember from those few times he'd helped with Mikey. The baby seemed calmer once changed, though Ray knew the hunger would soon become urgent. As he prepared to venture out for supplies, his phone rang. The caller ID showed unknown, but Ray recognized the number immediately. The halfway house, checking in. He let it ring through to voicemail. One problem at a time. Outside, the night had fully settled, bringing with it a light snow that dusted the sidewalks and clung to Ray's shoulders as he hurried to the store. He bought formula, diapers, a bottle, and a package of wipes, nearly depleting his wallet in the process. The Korean shop owner gave him a curious look as she rang up the items but asked no questions. When Ray returned, the baby was sleeping, tiny chest rising and falling beneath the blanket. In sleep, its face relaxed into an expression of complete trust, unaware of the inadequacy of its caretaker. Ray mixed the formula according to the package directions, his large hands clumsy with the tiny scoop. When he lifted the baby to feed it, the blanket fell away, revealing a small plastic hospital bracelet still attached to its wrist. "Baby boy Donovan," it read with a date just 2 weeks earlier. "So you got a last name at least," Ray murmured as the baby eagerly accepted the bottle. "Donovan." As the infant suckled, Ray felt something shift inside him, a protective instinct he'd thought long buried. The baby's complete vulnerability, its unwitting trust in him, awakened memories of his own son at this age. The weight in his arms, the soft breath against his neck when Mikey would fall asleep on his shoulder. The familiar ache of loss washed over him. Maybe this was his chance, not to replace what he'd lost, but to do something right for once. "I'll find somewhere safe for you," Ray promised the baby. "Someone better than me." But even as he said the words, Ray knew he wouldn't be calling the authorities first thing in the morning. Not yet. Something about the situation felt unfinished, a story only half told. Who leaves a baby by a dumpster with a hospital bracelet still attached? And why choose that particular dumpster, behind that particular building? The baby finished the bottle and Ray awkwardly positioned him against his shoulder, patting gently as he'd seen his ex-wife do countless times. After a small burp, the infant's eyes grew heavy, tiny fingers curling against Ray's collar. For the first time in years, Ray felt needed. It was terrifying and comforting all at once. Sleep came in fits and starts that night. Ray made a barricade of pillows on the bed for the baby and took the sagging couch himself. But every small sound had him jolting awake, checking to make sure the infant was breathing, was warm enough, hadn't somehow rolled despite being too young to do so. Morning arrived with weak winter sunlight filtering through the threadbare curtains. Ray's back ached from the couch, and a night of broken sleep left him gritty-eyed. But the baby was awake, making soft cooing sounds rather than crying. "You're a weird kid, you know that?" Ray said, lifting him carefully. Most babies would be raising hell by now. The diaper needed changing, and Ray managed it with marginally more skill than the night before. As he worked, he studied the baby's features more carefully in the daylight. Dark hair, olive-toned skin, and something about the shape of the eyes. Ray froze, a half-fastened diaper in his hands. The resemblance was probably nothing. His mind playing tricks, seeing patterns where none existed. But the baby's eyes, the slight upward tilt at the corners, reminded him forcefully of his ex-wife, Elena. His phone buzzed with a text. "Martinez, his parole officer. Missed check-in call. Explain at our meeting tomorrow." Ray sighed and finished with the diaper. One more black mark against him. But right now he had more pressing concerns. After feeding the baby again, Ray bundled him up and headed to the only place he could think of for answers. Chicago Metropolitan Hospital, where the bracelet indicated the baby had been born. The hospital's main entrance was crowded with the morning shuffle of staff changes and visitors. Ray pulled his worn beanie lower, conscious of how he must look. An ex-con with a baby that wasn't his. The baby was tucked inside his jacket, only his face visible, peaceful in sleep. At the information desk, a middle-aged woman with wiry gray hair looked up at him with practiced neutrality. "Can I help you?" Ray hesitated. "I need information about a baby born here 2 weeks ago. Last name Donovan." Her expression shifted immediately to suspicion. "Are you family?" "No, Ray struggled for words that wouldn't sound alarming. "The baby was left in my care. I'm trying to find out more about the mother." The woman's fingers paused over her keyboard. "Sir, we can't release patient information to non-family members. If you found an abandoned infant, you need to contact the police or Child Protective Services." Ray felt sweat break out across his forehead despite the chill he'd just come in from. The baby stirred against his chest. "Please," he said, lowering his voice. "I'm not looking to cause trouble. I just want to make sure he gets back to his mother, if possible. She might be in trouble herself." The receptionist's eyes softened slightly at the sight of the sleeping infant, but her resolve didn't waver. "I'm sorry, but hospital policy is very clear. If you're concerned about the child's welfare, the proper authorities can investigate." Ray nodded, backing away from the desk. He couldn't risk more questions, not with his record. As he turned to leave, he nearly collided with a nurse exiting the elevator. A woman with auburn hair pulled back in a messy bun, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she was finishing a long shift. "Oh, sorry," she said automatically. Then her eyes widened as she caught sight of the baby. "Wait, is that?" Ray froze, one hand protectively covering the baby's head. The nurse looked quickly around. then lowered her voice. Are you with Marissa? Is that her baby? The name meant nothing to Ray, but he recognized an opportunity. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak without revealing his ignorance. Relief washed over the nurse's face. Thank God. We've been so worried since she disappeared from the postpartum ward. Is she okay? She's struggling, Ray managed, which seemed a safe assumption about a woman who had abandoned her newborn. The nurse, her badge read, Sarah Linden, RN, stepped closer. Listen, I shouldn't be telling you this, but Marissa was terrified that her ex would find her and the baby. She mentioned he had connections with law enforcement, said he'd take the baby from her. When she disappeared, we were afraid. She trailed off, studying Ray's face more carefully. You're not one of her brothers, are you? No, Ray admitted, seeing no point in maintaining that fiction. I found the baby, near where I live. I'm trying to understand what happened. He expected her to back away, to call security. Instead, her expression hardened with resolve. Where can we talk? Not here. 20 minutes later, they sat in a diner 3 blocks from the hospital. The baby remained asleep against Ray's chest, oblivious to the tension at the table. I shouldn't be doing this, Sarah said, wrapping her hands around a mug of coffee. But that baby's safety matters more than hospital protocols. Marissa Donovan was 18, first-time mother. She came to us in labor, no prenatal care, no support person. She was terrified, not just of the birth, but of someone finding her. The baby's father? Ray asked. Sarah shook her head. She said he didn't know about the pregnancy. The person she feared was her ex-boyfriend, a police officer named Decker. She claimed he was obsessed with her, that he'd threatened her when she tried to leave him. Ray stiffened at the mention of a cop. His parole conditions made any interaction with police precarious at best. Did you report her concerns? Of course, Sarah said, a flash of defensiveness in her eyes. But without specifics, his first name, which precinct, there wasn't much to go on. And Marissa was, well, the doctor thought she might have some mental health issues. Postpartum depression or anxiety, possibly pre-existing conditions. Her concerns were documented, but she shrugged helplessly. And she just walked out with the baby 2 days after giving birth. Before being formally discharged, we filed the appropriate reports, but Sarah glanced at the sleeping infant. That was 12 days ago. Why would she keep him for nearly 2 weeks, then abandon him? Ray had been wondering the same thing. The note with him just said she couldn't help him. No other explanation. She named him, you know, Sarah said softly. Michael. She was very clear about that. The name hit Ray like a physical blow. Michael, like his own son. Are you going to contact child services? Sarah asked after a moment. Ray should say yes. It was the responsible answer, the legal answer. But something held him back. The coincidence of the name, the fear that had driven Marissa to abandon her child, the niggling sense that there was more to this story. Not yet, he said finally. I want to find Marissa first, make sure she's okay. She deserves a chance to change her mind, doesn't she? Sarah studied him, her expression unreadable. You know, most people who found a baby would have called 911 immediately. I'm not most people, Ray admitted. No, she agreed, her gaze sharpening. You're not. So why are you really doing this? It was a fair question, one Ray had been asking himself since the moment he'd lifted the baby from that cardboard box. I have a son named Michael, he said, the words coming with difficulty. I lost custody when I went to prison. I haven't seen him in 4 years. Maybe I'm trying to make up for that, I don't know. He expected judgment, but Sarah's expression remained neutral. Do you have somewhere safe to keep the baby while you look for his mother? Ray thought of his sparse apartment, the dwindling formula, his mandatory meeting with Martinez tomorrow. I'm figuring it out. Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a card. My number, she said, sliding it across the table. I'm breaking about a dozen rules here, but call me if you need help. And if you haven't found Marissa in 3 days, promise me you'll contact the authorities. Ray nodded, tucking the card into his pocket. As Sarah stood to leave, she hesitated. What's your name? Ray. Ray Mercer. Be careful, Ray Mercer, she said softly. For both your sakes. After Sarah left, Ray sat in the diner booth, the reality of his situation sinking in. He had no leads on Marissa Donovan beyond her name and her fear of an ex-boyfriend cop. He had a baby, Michael, who needed care he was ill-equipped to provide. And he had a parole officer meeting in less than 24 hours where he'd have to explain his missed check-in without mentioning any of this. The baby stirred against his chest, making small snuffling sounds that signaled hunger. As Ray prepared a bottle from the supplies he'd brought with him, his mind raced through his limited options. His brother Tony was still in prison with another 4 years on his sentence. His parents had moved to Arizona after his arrest, making it clear they'd wash their hands of both their sons. His ex-wife Elena had remarried and wanted nothing to do with him. The few friends he'd had before prison had evaporated during his incarceration. There was no one to turn to, no one to help shoulder this burden he'd inexplicably taken upon himself. As the baby suckled at the bottle, Ray made a decision. He would find Marissa Donovan and understand why she'd abandoned her child, and specifically why she'd left him near Ray's building. Until then, he would care for Michael as best he could. The search for Marissa began with the little information Ray had: her last name, her age, and her connection to a police officer named Decker. It wasn't much, but in the digital age, sometimes a name was enough. Back at his apartment, Ray settled the baby on his bed and opened his laptop, a refurbished model he'd purchased for job searches. A quick search for Marissa Donovan Chicago yielded too many results to be useful. Adding police officer Decker narrowed things significantly. 3 links down, he found a news article from 10 months ago: CPD officer James Decker cleared in domestic dispute. The piece was brief, mentioning an altercation at Decker's home where a young woman had called 911, then refused to press charges. The woman wasn't named, but the timing aligned with what Sarah had told him. Ray dug deeper, searching social media. Most of his profiles had gone dormant during his incarceration, but he still remembered how to navigate the platforms. On Instagram, he found several Marissa Donovans, but one profile picture showed a young woman with olive skin and dark hair, her eyes tilted slightly upward at the corners, eyes like the baby's. The profile was private, but the bio read simply, "Starting over." The last public post was dated nearly a year ago, around the time of the domestic dispute with Officer Decker, Ray guessed. The location tag placed her in Pilsen, a neighborhood not far from Ray's own. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Ray looked at the sleeping baby beside him, tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. "We're going to find your mama, Michael," he promised quietly, "and maybe figure out why she left you with me, of all people." The next morning brought new challenges. Ray needed to meet with Martinez at 2 p.m., which meant finding someone to watch the baby. Sarah was working a shift, according to her polite but apologetic text response. Ray considered his options, limited as they were. Mrs. Vasquez in apartment 2B was an elderly widow who occasionally nodded to Ray in the hallway, one of the few neighbors who didn't avert their eyes when they saw him coming. She had grandchildren who visited sometimes. Ray had heard their laughter through the thin walls. "Just for 2 hours," Ray explained, standing awkwardly in her doorway with Michael bundled in his arms. "It's an important meeting I can't miss." Mrs. Vasquez regarded him with shrewd eyes, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Your baby?" she asked directly. "No, Ray hesitated, unwilling to lie, but equally unwilling to admit he'd found an abandoned infant and hadn't contacted authorities. "I'm helping out a friend. She's in a difficult situation." Mrs. Vasquez's expression softened slightly. 2 hours only," she said, opening her door wider. "And you bring more diapers when you return. The little one will need them." Relief washed over Ray. "Thank you. I'll bring them, I promise." He handed over the baby and the bag of supplies he'd purchased. Michael remained asleep, oblivious to the exchange. "What is his name?" Mrs. Vasquez asked, settling the baby expertly in the crook of her arm. "Michael?" Ray said, the name still feeling strange on his tongue. Something flickered across Mrs. Vasquez's face, recognition perhaps. "Like your boy," she said quietly. Ray stared at her, surprised. He'd never mentioned his son to her, rarely spoke of him to anyone. "The walls are thin," she explained with a small shrug. "I have heard you some nights when the dreams come. You call for him." Heat crept up Ray's neck. The nightmares were regular visitors, memories of his arrest, of Mikey crying as the police led Ray away in handcuffs, of Elena's face twisted with disappointment and anger. He hadn't realized his nighttime demons were audible to his neighbors. "I'll be back by 4, he said, uncomfortable with the intimacy of the moment. Mrs. Vasquez nodded. "We will be fine, Senor Mercer. Go." Martinez's office was in a county building downtown, a 30-minute bus ride from Ray's apartment. The parole officer was a stocky man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and perpetually tired eyes. He'd been fair with Ray so far, neither overly harsh nor particularly sympathetic. "You missed check-in," Martinez said without preamble when Ray entered his office. Explanation? Ray had prepared for this, knowing he couldn't reveal the truth. "I picked up an extra shift at the warehouse. By the time I got home, it was past the call window. It won't happen again. Martinez studied him, clearly weighing whether to believe the explanation. You working tomorrow too? Yes, sir. Regular shift, 7 to 3. Your supervisor mentioned you asked for more hours? That true? Ray nodded. Trying to save for a car. Better transportation means more job options. It wasn't a lie exactly. He had been saving for a car before Michael. Now that money would go to formula and diapers for however long this temporary arrangement lasted. Martinez made a note in Ray's file. Employment stable, housing stable. No violations except the missed check-in. He looked up at Ray. You staying clean? Yes, sir. No contact with your brother or former associates? No. What about your ex-wife and son? Any progress there? The question hit like a sucker punch, as it always did. No, sir. Elena made it clear she doesn't want contact, and the custody agreement gives her full discretion about Mikey. Martinez nodded, unsurprised. 3 years is a long time for a kid that young. New daddy in the picture doesn't help. Ray clenched his jaw but said nothing. The reminder of Elena's new husband, a dental surgeon with no criminal record and a house in the suburbs, wasn't necessary. All right, Mercer. I'll let the missed call slide this time. Next check-in is Monday, 9 p.m. Don't miss it. I won't, Ray promised, rising to leave. One more thing, Martinez said, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. You seem tired. Everything else okay? Nothing you want to tell me about? For a moment, Ray considered unburdening himself, explaining about the baby, about his search for Marissa Donovan. Martinez wasn't a bad guy. He might even help navigate the complex situation without immediately calling child services. But years in the system had taught Ray caution. Once information was shared, it couldn't be unshared. And introducing an abandoned baby into his already precarious situation could tip the scales against him. Just the extra shifts, Ray said. Still adjusting to the schedule. Martinez nodded, clearly not entirely convinced but willing to let it go. Get some rest, Mercer. You look like hell. By the time Ray returned to Mrs. Vasquez's apartment, it was nearly 4:30. The bus had been delayed by an accident, leaving Ray anxious and guilty for keeping the elderly woman waiting. To his surprise, Mrs. Vasquez seemed in no hurry to relinquish the baby. Michael was awake, contentedly cradled in her arms as she sang softly to him in Spanish. He is a good baby, she said, smiling down at the infant. Very calm, Ray set a package of diapers on her coffee table. Thank you for watching him. I'm sorry I'm late. It is no trouble, she assured him. He reminds me of my Carlos when he was small. Her smile faltered slightly. But that was many years ago. Before the cancer took him, Ray hadn't known she'd lost a son. The revelation made him uncomfortable, aware of how little he knew about his neighbors despite living in the building for months. I'm sorry, he said inadequately. Mrs. Vasquez shrugged. Life takes and sometimes it gives again. Like this little one. She handed Michael to Ray, the transfer smooth and practiced. If you need help again, you may bring him. But perhaps next time, with more notice, eh? Yes, ma'am. Ray agreed, grateful beyond words. As he carried Michael back upstairs, Ray felt a strange sensation. A sense of community, however tentative. For months, he'd existed in isolation, cutting himself off from connections as a form of self-protection. Now, in the span of 2 days, he'd spoken more meaningfully with people than he had since his release. All because of a baby left at his doorstep. Back in his apartment, Ray settled Michael on the bed and returned to his laptop. Searching for more information on Marissa Donovan had yielded a possible lead. An address in Pilsen from a voter registration database, though it was nearly a year old. It was a place to start. The following morning, after a night punctuated by feeding and changing Michael, Ray bundled the baby against the winter chill and headed to Pilsen. The address led him to a 3-story walk-up, not unlike his own. Its brick facade weathered but solid. Ray checked the names beside the buzzers, but none read Donovan. Not unexpected, given how long ago the address had been registered. An elderly man was emerging from the building as Ray approached, holding the door open automatically as he passed. Excuse me, Ray said, shifting Michael in his arms. I'm looking for Marissa Donovan. She used to live here. The man squinted at Ray, then at the baby. Don't know Marissa. But there was a girl, dark hair, pretty. Moved out maybe 6-7 months back. Boyfriend came around after, looking for her. Real piece of work, that one. This boyfriend, was he a cop? The old man's expression soured. Yeah, made sure I knew it too. Flashed his badge like it gave him the right to bully information out of people. I told him what I'm telling you. She moved out, didn't say where to. Ray nodded, unsurprised but disappointed. Did she have any friends in the building? Anyone who might know where she went? The man considered for a moment. Try 3C. Jasmine. Those two were tight. Thanks, Ray said, slipping through the door before it closed. The building smelled of cooking spices and the faint mustiness common to older structures. Ray climbed to the third floor, Michael quiet against his chest, and knocked on apartment 3C. The woman who answered was in her mid-20s, with a nose ring and hair dyed a vibrant purple. She eyed Ray warily, her gaze lingering on the baby. Yeah, I'm looking for Marissa Donovan, Ray said. The guy downstairs said you might know where she went. Jasmine's posture stiffened. Who's asking? My name's Ray Mercer. I'm not... He hesitated, unsure how to explain his situation. I think she might be in trouble. I want to help. You a cop? Jasmine asked bluntly. Or working with Decker? No, Ray said firmly. I've never met Marissa, but I found her baby. Jasmine's eyes widened. That's... Her gaze dropped to Michael, then back to Ray's face. How do I know you're telling the truth? Ray reached carefully into his pocket and extracted the hospital bracelet he'd removed from Michael's wrist. Baby boy Donovan, he said, showing it to her. Born 2 weeks ago at Chicago Metropolitan. Jasmine stared at the bracelet, then stepped back. You better come in. The apartment was small but brightly decorated, potted plants crowding every windowsill. Jasmine cleared textbooks from a couch, indicating Ray should sit. I'm in nursing school, she explained, noticing his glance at the books. That's how I met Marissa. We had general education classes together at Malcolm X College. When did you last see her? Ray asked, shifting Michael to his shoulder as the baby began to fuss. About a month ago, Jasmine said, watching him with the infant. She was very pregnant, very scared. Decker had found her again. He always did somehow. She was staying with me until she could figure out her next move. What happened between them? Ray asked. I read something about a domestic dispute. Jasmine's expression darkened. Dispute? That's what they called it when she ended up with broken ribs and a concussion. Decker's buddies on the force made sure the charges disappeared, convinced her she'd be better off dropping it. And she was pregnant at the time? No, that came later. After she went back to him, Jasmine twisted a ring on her finger anxiously. That's the cycle, you know. Leave, go back, leave again. When she found out she was pregnant, she swore she was done for good. Said she wouldn't let her baby grow up with a father like that. So she disappeared. Ray concluded, but not well enough if he found her at your place. Marissa thought he might have used police resources to track her, checking her phone records maybe. After he showed up here, she left the next day. Didn't even tell me where she was going. Said it was safer if I didn't know. But she gave birth 2 weeks ago, Ray said, gently patting Michael's back as the baby's fussing increased, and somehow ended up leaving her baby near my apartment building. Jasmine's eyes narrowed. Where exactly was that? Logan Square. Old building on Kedzie. Something flickered across Jasmine's face. Recognition. That's... Wait here. She disappeared into a back room, returning moments later with a small photo. She handed it to Ray, careful not to touch his fingers. The photo showed Jasmine and Marissa, arms around each other, smiling outside a brick building. Ray recognized it immediately, his own apartment building. That was from last summer, when we helped my cousin move in, Jasmine explained. Luis Vasquez. 3rd floor. Ray stared at her, the pieces clicking into place. Mrs. Vasquez's son? Jasmine nodded. Luis moved to Detroit for work a few months later. But Marissa remembered the building. She always said it felt safe there, you know? Mrs. V looking out for everyone, bringing food to Luis when he was working late. Ray's mind raced. Marissa had chosen his building deliberately, not randomly, but because she had a connection to it, because she believed Mrs. Vasquez still lived there and might help her baby. She didn't abandon him, Ray said slowly, the realization dawning. She was leaving him with someone she trusted, or at least in a place she trusted. The baby's cries grew more insistent, and Ray recognized the hunger signals he'd learned over the past days. Jasmine watched as he awkwardly prepared a bottle one-handed. You seem to be getting the hang of it, she observed. Ray shrugged. Learning as I go. I have a son, older now, but I wasn't around much when he was this small. Why are you doing this? Jasmine asked the question direct. Most people would have called the police. It was the same question Sarah had asked, the same one Ray had been asking himself. The answer came more easily this time. Because she was scared enough to leave her baby. Because whatever she's running from, involving the system, might make it worse. He looked down at Michael, now contentedly drinking from the bottle. And because I know what it's like to lose a child, I wouldn't wish that on anyone, especially not a mother who clearly wanted better for her son. Jasmine studied him, her initial wariness softening slightly. I might have a way to contact her, she admitted. We set up emergency emails, accounts we'd only use if absolutely necessary. I don't know if she's checking it, but it's worth trying, Ray urged. Tell her Michael is safe. Tell her I want to help, not judge. And tell her about Mrs. Vasquez, that her instinct about the building was right. As Jasmine typed the email on her phone, Ray felt a cautious hope rising. For the first time since finding Michael, he had a concrete connection to Marissa, a chance to understand the full story. Sent, Jasmine said, setting her phone down. Now we wait, but don't expect an immediate response. She's being careful. I understand careful, Ray said. It had become his default mode since prison. Watching, assessing, protecting himself from potential threats. Survival instinct, the counselor at Stateville had called it. Michael had fallen asleep after his bottle, tiny body relaxed against Ray's chest. The trust in that simple act of surrender still amazed him. How completely the infant depended on him. How unearned that faith was. You can leave him with me if you want, Jasmine offered unexpectedly. I have clinical rotations tomorrow, but today I'm free. And I know more about babies than you do, I'm guessing. The offer was tempting. Ray was exhausted, running on minimal sleep and maximum stress. But the thought of parting with Michael, even temporarily, created a knot of anxiety in his chest. Thanks, but I should get him home, Ray said. If Marissa responds, call me right away. He left his number with Jasmine and headed back to his apartment, his mind churning with the new information. Marissa hadn't randomly abandoned her baby. She'd been trying to place him somewhere she considered safe. The realization changed everything. The next 2 days passed in a blur of feeding schedules, diaper changes, and fitful sleep. Ray continued his search for Marissa, using the little information he had to explore possible locations. He checked women's shelters, those that would speak to a single man with a baby, called hospitals asking about recent admissions matching her description, and even cautiously approached a community center known for helping domestic violence victims. No one had seen or heard from a young woman named Marissa Donovan. On the third day, when hope was beginning to fade, Ray's phone rang with an unknown number. Hello? He answered cautiously. Ray Mercer? The voice was female, tense with apprehension. Yes, this is Marissa Donovan. Jasmine said you found my son. Relief washed over Ray, so intense it left him momentarily speechless. Yes, he managed finally. Michael, he's safe. There was a small sound on the other end. A stifled sob, perhaps. Is he okay? He's perfect, Ray assured her. Healthy, eating well. He's sleeping right now. I never wanted to leave him, Marissa said, her voice breaking. You have to believe that. But Decker found me at the motel. I barely got away and I couldn't risk him finding Michael. I understand, Ray said, and he did. The desperate need to protect a child, to make impossible choices when all options seem dangerous. Where are you now? Are you safe? A pause. Relatively. I'm staying with someone, but I can't stay here much longer. And I can't involve them any more than I already have. Decker has a way of making people suffer for helping me. We need to meet, Ray said. I have ideas that might help, but we should talk in person. Another pause, longer this time. How do I know I can trust you? It was a fair question, one Ray had no easy answer for. You don't, he admitted. But I've been caring for your son for 3 days without contacting authorities. I'm looking for you, not to judge or report, but to help. Take that for what it's worth. The line was silent so long, Ray thought she might have hung up. Tomorrow, Marissa said finally. Noon. There's a playground in Humboldt Park near the field house. Bring Michael. I'll be there, Ray promised. And Ray? Her voice hardened. Come alone. If I see anyone else, anyone at all with you, I'm gone. And you'll never find me again. The line went dead. Ray looked down at Michael, now awake and watching him with those surprisingly alert eyes. We're going to see your mama tomorrow, he told the infant, a complex mix of emotions swirling through him. Relief that Marissa was alive and reaching out. Concern about her safety. And beneath it all, a subtle dread at the thought of giving up the baby he'd come to care for so deeply in such a short time. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the kind of winter day where sunlight glints off icicles and does nothing to warm the air. Ray dressed Michael in layers, tucking an extra blanket around him before zipping him inside his jacket. Important day, little man, he murmured, checking that he had everything. Formula, diapers, the hospital bracelet as proof of identity. The bus ride to Humboldt Park took 40 minutes. Michael sleeping contentedly against Ray's chest for most of it. Ray used the time to organize his thoughts, to plan what he would say to Marissa when they met. The playground was deserted when Ray arrived, hardly surprising given the temperature. He found a bench with a clear view of the surroundings and settled there to wait, keeping Michael warm inside his jacket. At precisely noon, a slight figure appeared at the edge of the playground. She wore a knit cap pulled low and a scarf wrapped high, leaving only her eyes visible. Those eyes scanned the area carefully before she approached, her gait cautious, ready to flee. Ray remained seated, making no sudden movements as she drew nearer. When she was about 10 feet away, he slowly unzipped his jacket to reveal Michael's sleeping face. Marissa's breath caught audibly. She closed the remaining distance quickly, eyes never leaving her son. "Michael," she whispered, reaching trembling fingers toward the baby, but stopping just short of touching him. "He's okay," Ray repeated. "You can hold him." Tears welled in Marissa's eyes as she carefully lifted the baby from Ray's arms. The motion woke Michael, who blinked up at the new face above him. For a moment, he seemed confused. Then his tiny features relaxed in what might have been recognition. "Oh, God," Marissa sobbed quietly, pressing her lips to his forehead. "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry." Ray gave her a moment with her son, watching the reunion with a tightness in his chest. When her tears subsided, he gestured to the bench beside him. "We should talk," he said gently. "It's too cold for him to be out long." Marissa nodded, sitting carefully with Michael cradled against her. Up close, Ray could see the shadows under her eyes, the thinness of her face suggesting she hadn't been eating properly. "Thank you," she said, not looking at Ray but focusing on her son. "For taking care of him. For looking for me." "Why my building?" Ray asked. "Jasmine mentioned you knew about Mrs. Vasquez, but still." Marissa adjusted Michael's blanket before answering. "I remembered how kind she was when I visited Luis. How she seemed to watch over everyone in the building. I thought," she swallowed hard, "I thought she might find him, might help him until I could come back. Instead, I found him," Ray said. "An ex-con who happened to take out the trash at the right time." Marissa looked up sharply. "Ex-con? 3 years for accessory to armed robbery," Ray said, seeing no point in hiding it. "My brother's idea, my stupid choice to go along with it. I've been out 8 months." He expected fear, perhaps disgust. Instead, Marissa studied him with something like understanding. "We all make choices we regret," she said quietly. "Some of us just pay more for them than others." Ray nodded, surprised by the empathy from someone so young. "Tell me about Decker," he said. "What exactly are we dealing with?" Marissa tensed, instinctively pulling Michael closer. He has obsessive tendencies. When we were together, he needed to control everything. Where I went, who I saw, what I wore. When I tried to leave, he'd find ways to pull me back. Threats sometimes, apologies other times. The domestic dispute I read about? Her free hand unconsciously touched her ribs. He was drunk. I called 911 before I thought about what would happen. His buddies showed up, took him outside to calm down, then explained to me how filing charges would ruin his career. How it would be my fault if he lost everything. "So you dropped it," Ray guessed. "I was 19, scared and alone," Marissa said, a flash of defiance in her eyes. "You think you'd do better?" "No," Ray admitted. "I think most people wouldn't." Michael began to fuss, and Marissa rocked him gently, a natural motion that calmed him immediately. "When I found out I was pregnant, I knew I had to leave for good," she continued. "I couldn't raise a child with him. Couldn't let Michael grow up thinking that kind of control was normal. So I disappeared, changed my phone, moved between friends' places, paid cash for everything. But he kept finding you," Ray said. Marissa nodded. "He's a cop. He has resources, connections. After he found me at Jasmine's, I went to a motel way out in the suburbs. Paid cash, used a fake name. 2 days after Michael was born, there he was, knocking on my door." "How?" Ray wondered. "I don't know. Hospital records, maybe. Or he's having my friends watched." She shook her head. "I grabbed Michael and ran out the back while the manager was talking to him. I had nowhere safe to go. Nowhere he wouldn't eventually find us." "So you left Michael where you thought someone would care for him," Ray concluded. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done," Marissa whispered, tears threatening again. "But I hoped it would keep him safe until I could figure something out. Decker wants me back, but he never wanted a baby. If I disappeared without Michael, he might stop looking," Ray finished. "Or at least focus solely on finding you, not the baby. It was supposed to be temporary," she insisted, just until I could find real help, somewhere Decker couldn't reach. But every place I called, every person I reached out to, they all required police reports, official documentation, the things I can't provide without putting us right back in danger. Ray understood her dilemma all too well. The system that was supposed to protect often had requirements that made it inaccessible to those who needed it most. I might have a solution, he said carefully, but it would mean trusting me more than you have any reason to. Marissa looked at him fully for the first time, her eyes wary but not dismissive. What kind of solution? I have a parole officer who's actually decent, Ray explained. Not all cops are like Decker. If we bring him evidence of what Decker's doing, there are channels, procedures for handling corrupt officers. You think I haven't tried that? Marissa asked, bitterness edging her voice. His captain all but patted me on the head, told me I was overreacting to normal relationship problems. Then we go higher, Ray said. State police, internal affairs, the media if we have to. But we need evidence. Texts, voicemails, anything showing threats or harassment. Marissa bit her lip. I have some messages he sent after I left. Photos of the injuries from that night. I was going to use them if he ever tried to take Michael legally. That's a start, Ray said. But we also need somewhere safe for you and Michael while this plays out. Somewhere Decker wouldn't think to look. Where? Marissa asked. Ray took a deep breath. My ex-wife's house in the suburbs. She remarried, lives with her husband and my son. Decker would have no connection to her, no reason to look there. Marissa stared at him. Your ex-wife would help a stranger? And her baby? I don't know, Ray admitted. We haven't spoken in 4 years. But Elena has a good heart, and she has a son she'd do anything to protect. If I explained the situation, the proposition seemed absurd even as he voiced it. Elena had made it abundantly clear she wanted nothing to do with him. The likelihood of her agreeing to harbor Marissa and Michael was slim at best. Yet something told Ray it was their best option. Elena had contacts in the legal community through her husband. She lived in a secure neighborhood. And most importantly, there was no connection between her and Marissa that Decker could possibly trace. It's worth trying, Ray said, more confidently than he felt. And in the meantime, you and Michael can stay with me. My building has a back entrance and Mrs. Vasquez would help keep watch. Marissa was quiet for a long moment, considering. Michael had fallen asleep again in her arms, his tiny face peaceful. Okay, she said finally, but if your ex-wife says no, we need another plan immediately. I won't put Michael at risk again. Agreed, Ray said, relief washing through him. Let's get somewhere warm, and I'll make the call. They took the bus back to Ray's apartment. Marissa tensed beside him, her eyes constantly scanning other passengers. Michael remained asleep, exhausted from the cold and excitement. Back at the apartment, Ray showed Marissa the makeshift nursery area he'd created, a drawer padded with blankets that served as a crib, the supplies he'd purchased arranged neatly beside it. It's not much, he apologized. It's perfect, Marissa said, carefully laying Michael in the drawer. You did all this for a baby you found in an alley. Why? Ray considered the question as he watched Michael sleep. When I was in prison, I had a lot of time to think about choices. The ones I made, the ones I wished I'd made. I promised myself if I ever got a second chance, I'd make better ones. He turned to face her. This felt like one of those moments, a chance to do something right. Marissa nodded, understanding in her eyes. Your son is lucky to have you. The words hit Ray with unexpected force. He doesn't have me, he said quietly. Not really. Not for a long time now. Taking a deep breath, Ray pulled out his phone. It was time to call Elena. The number hadn't changed in 4 years, though Ray had only used it once since his release. A brief, awkward call to wish Mikey a happy birthday. The call had been ended abruptly when Elena's husband had taken the phone, explaining that Michael was busy with his friends. Ray's hand shook slightly as he dialed. 3 rings, then 4. He was about to hang up when Elena's voice came through. Hello? Cautious, recognizing the number but wary. Elena, it's me, Ray. A pause. What do you want, Ray? Michael's at school. I'm not calling about Mikey. I need your help. It's urgent and it's not for me. Another pause, longer this time. I'm listening. As concisely as possible, Ray explained the situation. Finding Michael, searching for Marissa, the danger posed by Decker. Elena remained silent throughout, offering neither encouragement nor refusal. So you see, Ray concluded, they need somewhere safe, somewhere he wouldn't think to look, just for a few days until we can get the evidence to the right people. The silence stretched so long, Ray thought the call had dropped. "Bring them here at 8, Elena said finally. "David will be at his conference in Boston. We'll have 3 days." Relief flooded through Ray. "Thank you, Elena. I know this is... I'm not doing it for you," she interrupted. "I'm doing it for her and for the baby. Some things transcend personal history." "I understand," Ray said. "We'll be there at 8. After hanging up, Ray relayed the conversation to Marissa, who had been watching with barely concealed anxiety. "She agreed?" Marissa asked, disbelief evident in her voice. Ray nodded. "Elena has strong opinions about the right thing to do. Always has. Must be why she married you once." Marissa observed with the hint of a smile, the first Ray had seen from her. "Once," Ray agreed. "A long time ago." They spent the afternoon gathering what little Marissa had with her, a small backpack containing clothes, toiletries, and her evidence against Decker, and preparing for the evening trip to the suburbs. Ray was acutely aware of the risk they were taking. If Decker was as resourceful as Marissa believed, movement of any kind increased the danger of detection. But staying put wasn't an option either. Ray's apartment was too exposed, and Marissa couldn't remain in hiding forever, especially not with an infant. At 7 p.m., they left through the back entrance of the building, Ray carrying Michael while Marissa followed close behind. Mrs. Vasquez watched from her doorway as they descended the stairs, her expression a mixture of concern and understanding. Ray had explained the situation to her in brief, vague terms, enough that she understood the need for discretion. "Be careful, mijo," she called softly to Ray. "Both of you." The night was cold and dark as they made their way to the bus stop. Ray had considered calling a taxi but decided against it. Too traceable, too many questions. The bus would be slower but offer the anonymity of public transportation. As they waited at the stop, Ray couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. He scanned the street, noting the few pedestrians, the cars parked along the curb, the windows of nearby buildings. Nothing seemed immediately suspicious, yet the sensation persisted. "Are you okay?" Marissa asked, noticing his unease. "Fine," Ray assured her, adjusting Michael inside his jacket. "Just ready to get there." The bus arrived 5 minutes late, its headlights cutting through the darkness. They boarded quickly, Ray paying for both of them, and found seats near the back. The vehicle was half empty, most passengers focused on their phones or staring out windows at the passing city. Ray checked his watch, 7:20. With a 40-minute ride ahead, they would arrive almost exactly at 8, as promised. The suburbs where Elena lived were a world away from Ray's neighborhood. Larger homes set back from tree-lined streets, carefully maintained parks, and shopping centers with upscale stores. As the bus neared their stop, Ray felt an old familiar ache. This was the life he might have had, the environment where his son was growing up without him. "This is us," he told Marissa as the bus slowed. They exited at a stop near a small park. From there, it was a 10-minute walk to Elena's house, a 2-story colonial with dormered windows and a neatly landscaped yard. Even in winter, with the gardens dormant, the house exuded a sense of stability and comfort that made Ray's apartment seem even shabbier by comparison. Ray hesitated at the foot of the driveway, suddenly unsure. 4 years since he'd seen this house. 4 years since he'd seen his son in person. The weight of that absence pressed down on him as he led Marissa to the front door. Before he could knock, the door opened. Elena stood in the entryway, her dark hair shorter than Ray remembered, her face thinner but still beautiful in the way that had first attracted him 15 years earlier. Her eyes moved quickly from Ray to Marissa, then to the bundle inside his jacket. "Come in," she said simply, stepping aside. Quickly, the house was warm and smelled of something recently baked. Ray noticed small changes since he'd last been there. New furniture, different paint on the walls, photos he'd never seen featuring a boy who had grown inches taller than in his memories. "Is he here?" Ray couldn't help asking, his eyes drawn to a school photo of Mikey on the wall. "Sleep over at a friend's," Elena replied, her tone making it clear the arrangement was no coincidence. "I thought it best." Ray nodded, understanding the implication. Elena wasn't ready for him to see their son, wasn't prepared to explain Ray's sudden appearance after so long an absence. "This is Marissa," Ray said, turning to introductions. "And this is Michael." Something flickered across Elena's face at the name. Recognition, perhaps pain. But she recovered quickly, extending a hand to Marissa. "Elena Caruso," she said. Ray explained your situation. "I've made up the guest room for you and the baby." "Thank you," Marissa said, the words inadequate for the magnitude of the help being offered. "I know this is a huge imposition. It's the right thing to do, Elena said simply. No woman should have to run from violence, especially not with a child. She led them upstairs to a well-appointed guest room with a queen bed, and to Ray's surprise, a portable crib already set up in the corner. We kept it from when Michael was small, Elena explained, seeing his expression. Just in case we had visitors with children, or another child of their own, Ray thought but didn't say. A future that had disappeared when he'd chosen to help his brother that fateful night. You can put your things here, Elena continued, addressing Marissa. Bathroom is through that door. Kitchen's open if you're hungry. Ray, you can take the couch downstairs. The arrangement was clear. Marissa and the baby were welcome guests. Ray was being tolerated for their sake. I need to see what evidence you have, Elena said to Marissa once they'd settled in. I have a friend who works for the state's attorney's office. She might be able to help, but she'll need something solid to work with. Marissa retrieved her phone and a small notebook from her backpack. I saved everything, she said. Texts, voicemails, and I documented the injuries with photos and journal entries, dates and times. Elena nodded approvingly. Smart. We'll go through it together in the morning. For now, you should rest. Both of you, she added with a glance at Ray. As Elena showed Marissa how to use the baby monitor and where to find extra supplies, Ray took the opportunity to wander down the hallway. The door to Mikey's room stood slightly ajar, tempting him. Inside, the room had transformed from the nursery he remembered to a space clearly belonging to a grade schooler. Superhero posters covered the walls. A desk held neatly arranged school supplies. The bookshelf was filled with chapter books and science kits. What struck Ray most, however, was the baseball glove on the nightstand. Brand new, the leather still stiff and unmarked. Beside it lay a baseball signed by a player Ray didn't recognize. He started Little League last spring, Elena said from the doorway, making Ray start guiltily. He's pretty good. Has a strong arm, like his grandfather, Ray said softly. His own father had been a semi-pro player in his youth, before factory work and alcohol had claimed his potential. Yes, Elena agreed. Though he doesn't know that. He doesn't remember much about your side of the family. The statement wasn't accusatory, merely factual, but it cut deeply nonetheless. The room looks great, Ray said, changing the subject. He seems happy. He is, Elena confirmed. David is good to him. Patient, involved. The unspoken comparison hung in the air. Unlike you, I'm glad, Ray said and meant it. Whatever his feelings about Elena's new husband, Mikey's well-being was what mattered most. We should go downstairs, Elena said after a moment. Let me show you where you'll sleep. The couch was comfortable enough, made up with sheets and a blanket that smelled of the same detergent Elena had always used. The familiarity was both comforting and painful, a reminder of domestic routines long lost to him. Thank you, Ray said as Elena prepared to head back upstairs. Not just for the couch, for everything. For helping them when you had every reason to say no. Elena paused, her expression softening slightly. People can surprise you sometimes, Ray. Even people who've disappointed you before. It was as close to forgiveness as she was likely to offer, and Ray recognized it for the gift it was. Good night, Elena. Good night, Ray. Ray lay awake long after the house had gone quiet, his mind racing with the events of the past few days. The baby who had appeared in his life so suddenly, Marissa's fight to protect her son, and now this unexpected return to Elena's house, to the periphery of his son's life. Tomorrow they would review Marissa's evidence and contact Elena's friend at the state's attorney's office. If all went well, they could begin the process of protecting Marissa and Michael legally, of holding Decker accountable for his actions. But as Ray drifted towards sleep, it wasn't tomorrow's plans that occupied his thoughts. It was the baseball glove on Mikey's nightstand, the sign of a childhood continuing without him, and the faint, impossible hope that somehow, someday, he might find his way back into his son's life. Morning came with the smell of coffee and the soft sounds of an infant's babbling. Ray opened his eyes to find Elena moving quietly around the kitchen, dressed for work in a blouse and pencil skirt. For a disorienting moment, it felt like the past. Elena preparing for her day at the law office where she'd worked before Mikey was born, before everything had fallen apart. There's coffee, she said, noticing he was awake. Marissa and the baby are still asleep. Ray sat up, running a hand through his hair. You're going to work? Half day, Elena explained. I couldn't cancel without questions. I'll be back by noon. My friend from the state's attorney's office is coming here at 1. That was fast, Ray observed, accepting the mug of coffee she offered. Some situations can't wait, Elena said simply. And Anita owes me a favor. Ray hadn't known Elena still practiced law, though it made sense. She'd been ambitious, talented. A 3-year hiatus while her husband was incarcerated wouldn't have derailed her career entirely. What does David think about all this? Ray asked, curious about the man who had replaced him in Elena and Mikey's lives. David doesn't know, Elena said, and he won't, not unless absolutely necessary. What he doesn't know, he can't be held accountable for. The lawyer's mind, always calculating risk. It was one of the things Ray had loved about her, once upon a time. Will Mikey be home today? Ray asked, the question he'd been avoiding. Elena's expression closed slightly. He's staying with friends through the weekend, as planned. David picks him up Sunday evening when he returns from his conference. Ray nodded, understanding the unspoken message. His presence in this house was temporary, not a doorway back into his son's life. I'll be gone before they get back, he promised. Elena studied him for a moment. You look better than the last time I saw you, she said unexpectedly. Healthier, more present. Prison has a way of focusing the mind, Ray said, attempting humor but falling short. And I've been clean since I got out. Working steady, trying to rebuild. I'm glad, Elena said, and seemed to mean it. Mikey asks about you sometimes. Not often, but occasionally. I never quite know what to tell him. The revelation startled Ray. What do you say? That you made mistakes, but you're working to be better. That you love him, even if you can't be with him right now. Thank you, Ray said quietly. For not making me the villain. Elena shrugged, gathering her keys and purse. Children need the truth, Ray, just in age-appropriate doses. The truth is, you did something stupid that hurt a lot of people, including yourself, but you're not a monster. I never thought you were. Before Ray could respond, she was heading for the door. There's food in the fridge. Make yourselves comfortable, but stay away from the windows. I'll be back by noon. Then she was gone, leaving Ray with her words echoing in his mind. Not a monster. It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly, but it was more than he'd expected, more than he might deserve. Upstairs, Marissa emerged from the guest room an hour later, Michael awake and alert in her arms. She looked better after a full night's sleep in a real bed, some color returning to her cheeks, the shadows under her eyes less pronounced. I think it's the longest he slept in weeks, she said, nodding toward Michael. Something about feeling safe. Elena's gone to work, but will be back at noon, Ray explained, offering to make breakfast. Her friend from the state's attorney's office is coming at 1. We should get your evidence organized before then. Over a simple meal of eggs and toast, they reviewed Marissa's documentation. The evidence was more substantial than Ray had dared hope. Dozens of threatening texts from Decker, voicemails where his tone alternated between pleading and menacing, photos of bruises and medical records from 2 separate emergency room visits. Most damning was a series of texts from after Marissa had first left him, where Decker explicitly threatened to use his position as a police officer to make her life a living hell if she didn't return. This is good, Ray said, scanning through the material. Clear pattern of abuse, specific threats, misuse of authority. Exactly what we need. Marissa nodded, though her expression remained anxious. But will it be enough? He's a cop. They protect their own. Not all of them, Ray said. My parole officer, Martinez. He's tough but fair. There are good ones out there, ones who take the badge seriously. I hope you're right, Marissa said, gently rocking Michael as he began to fuss. For both our sakes. They spent the morning organizing the evidence chronologically, creating a clear timeline of Decker's abuse and harassment. By the time Elena returned at 12:30, they had assembled a compelling case. Elena arrived with a sense of urgency, quickly reviewing what they'd prepared. Anita will be here in half an hour, she explained. She's bringing a detective she trusts from the state police. They'll handle this outside CPD channels initially, given Decker's position. The next few hours passed in a blur of explanations and documentation. Anita Suarez, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with a no-nonsense manner, listened carefully to Marissa's story, occasionally stopping her to clarify details or timeframes. The detective, a tall black man named Williams, took meticulous notes and asked pointed questions about Decker's behavior and connections within the department. This is textbook intimate partner terrorism, Suarez observed after reviewing the evidence. The isolation, the control, the escalating violence, the use of institutional power to intimidate, and the fact that he's using police resources to track you, that's an abuse of authority we can leverage. What happens now? Marissa asked, holding Michael close. We move quickly, Suarez said. Detective Williams will take your statement officially and secure an emergency order of protection. Meanwhile, I'll prepare to bring charges. Not just domestic violence, but abuse of office, stalking, witness intimidation. He'll know I've come forward, Marissa said, fear evident in her voice. He'll be more dangerous than ever. That's why you'll have protection, Williams assured her. We have safe houses specifically for high-risk domestic violence cases. And once charges are filed, he'll be suspended pending investigation, his badge and weapon confiscated. What about her location? Ray asked. How do we keep that secure? Everything goes through my office directly, Suarez explained. No records in the general system until he's in custody. Detective Williams has a team he trusts implicitly, no leaks. The plan was methodical, professional, reassuring in its thoroughness. Yet Ray could see the lingering doubt in Marissa's eyes, the fear born from betrayal by the very systems now promising protection. I'll be with you, he found himself saying. Horford? Through all of it. If you want. Marissa looked at him, surprise giving way to gratitude. You've already done so much. Your parole, Martinez will understand, Ray said more confidently than he felt. This is about doing what's right. By evening, the machinery of justice was in motion. Marissa had given her official statement. The emergency order of protection had been granted. Arrangements had been made for Marissa and Michael to move to a safe house the following day, where they would remain until Decker was in custody. You should both stay here tonight, Elena said after Suarez and Williams had left. It's safer than moving again before everything's in place. Ray nodded gratefully. Thank you for everything. That night, as the house settled into silence, Ray found himself unable to sleep. The events of the past few days played on loop in his mind. Finding Michael, meeting Marissa, the unexpected return to Elena's home. So much had changed in less than a week. A soft sound from the kitchen drew his attention. Rising from the couch, Ray found Elena at the counter, a glass of wine in her hand, her expression distant. Couldn't sleep either? He asked. She shook her head, just thinking about everything. How quickly life can change. How the past has a way of circling back. Ray leaned against the doorframe. I never expected to be back here. No, Elena agreed. Neither did I. Life has a strange way of reconnecting threads we thought were severed. They were quiet for a moment, the silence between them less tense than it had been in years. Do you remember when we brought Mikey home? Elena asked suddenly. How terrified we were. Ray smiled at the memory. You'd read every baby book ever written, and I was still convinced we'd break him somehow. And that first night, when he wouldn't stop crying, we took shifts walking him around the living room, Ray recalled. I sang every Johnny Cash song I knew until he finally fell asleep. Elena's expression softened. You were a good father, Ray. Before everything. That's what makes it all so sad. You had it in you to be extraordinary. The words landed like a physical weight on Ray's chest. Acknowledgement of what had been lost. What might have been. I'm trying to find my way back, he said quietly. Not to what we had, I know that's gone, but to being someone Mikey could be proud of, eventually. Elena studied him over the rim of her wine glass. Taking in an abandoned baby, helping a young mother escape abuse. It's a start. It was as close to encouragement as she was likely to offer, and Ray accepted it with a nod. We should both try to sleep, Elena said after a moment. Tomorrow will be complicated enough. As Ray settled back onto the couch, he felt a strange sense of peace despite the uncertainty that lay ahead. For the first time in years, he was exactly where he needed to be, doing exactly what needed to be done. It wasn't redemption, not yet, but it was a step in that direction. Morning brought a flurry of activity. Detective Williams arrived early to escort Marissa and Michael to the safe house, a location known only to him and a select few others. The plan was meticulous: separate vehicles, circuitous routes, digital silence. You're sure about this? Marissa asked Ray as she prepared to leave. Coming with us? Your parole is less important than your safety, Ray said firmly. I've already called Martinez to explain. He wasn't thrilled, but he understands. I'm not violating any conditions, just bending them a little. The truth was more complicated. Martinez had been skeptical, concerned about Ray's involvement in a potentially volatile situation. But when Ray had explained about finding Michael, about the connection he felt to both the baby and Marissa's plight, the parole officer had reluctantly agreed to give him some latitude. Don't make me regret this, Mercer, Martinez had warned. And check in daily, or I'll have to report you as non-compliant. As Marissa settled Michael into the car seat Williams had brought, Elena approached Ray. Be careful, she said quietly. What you're doing is right, but right doesn't always mean safe. I know, Ray assured her. We'll be fine. Suarez and Williams know what they're doing. Elena nodded, then hesitated as if weighing a decision. When this is over, when things have settled, maybe you could call. Mikey has a baseball game next month. His first of the season. The invitation caught Ray completely off guard. You'd let me come? I think it's time, Elena said simply. He's old enough to understand some of the complications, and he should know his father is trying to be a better man. Ray felt something shift inside him, a door opening that he'd believed permanently closed. I'd like that, very much. Their goodbye was awkward but not cold. A tentative handshake that transformed unexpectedly into a brief hug. Not the embrace of lovers reunited, but of two people acknowledging a shared past and the possibility of a different kind of future. The Safe House was a nondescript ranch-style home in a quiet suburb north of Chicago. Plain furnishings, security systems, and a police presence disguised as landscape workers across the street. It felt sterile but secure, a holding pattern rather than a home. As the days passed, Ray found himself falling into a routine with Marissa and Michael. Bottle feedings and diaper changes, quiet conversations during Michael's naps, planning for the uncertain future. Marissa spoke of going back to school, of providing a stable life for her son away from Chicago and its painful memories. Ray shared his hopes of rebuilding a relationship with his own son, of finding work that mattered, of becoming someone worthy of trust again. On the fourth day, Williams arrived with news. Decker had been arrested. The evidence had been overwhelming, and when confronted with it, one of his fellow officers had broken ranks, revealing additional incidents of abuse and misconduct. He's in custody, Williams assured them. No bail given the nature of the threats in his position. The department is cooperating fully with the investigation now that the evidence is undeniable. Relief washed over Marissa's face. So it's over? We're safe? The immediate danger is over, Williams confirmed. But you still have decisions to make. The prosecutor will need your testimony. And after that, you'll need to decide where you and Michael go next. The reality of those decisions hung in the air long after Williams had left. Marissa sat on the couch, Michael sleeping peacefully in her arms, her expression pensive. I've been thinking about San Diego, she said finally. My aunt lives there. She offered to help when I first got pregnant, but I was too afraid Decker would find me if I contacted family. With him in custody, maybe it's time to take her up on it. California would be a fresh start. Ray agreed, ignoring the unexpected pang the thought of them leaving created. Good weather for the little guy. Marissa studied him. What about you? What happens next for Ray Mercer? It was a question Ray had been asking himself with increasing frequency. The past week had changed something fundamental in him. Awakened purpose, connection, hope. I'll go back to my apartment, my job at the warehouse, he said. Keep meeting with Martinez, keep saving for that car, and ... He hesitated. Elena invited me to Mikey's baseball game next month, so maybe that's a start. A new chapter. He'll be lucky to have you back in his life, Marissa said softly. You're a good man, Ray. Better than you give yourself credit for. The words touched something deep in Ray, a place long closed off by guilt and self-recrimination. I don't know about that, he said, but I'm trying. That's something I wasn't doing before. Before Michael. Before the baby in the box had forced him to look beyond his own isolation, to remember what it meant to be needed, to care for someone more vulnerable than himself. 2 days later, Ray stood with Marissa in the kitchen of the Safe House, helping her prepare bottles for the journey to San Diego. Her aunt would meet them at the airport. Williams had arranged for security to escort them through the terminal, and Suarez had ensured Decker remained in custody with no possibility of interfering. I don't know how to thank you, Marissa said, pausing in her preparations. For everything. For finding Michael. For believing me. For helping when you had every reason to walk away. You don't need to thank me, Ray said honestly. Finding him, finding both of you, it gave me something I didn't know I was missing. Purpose, maybe. Or hope. Marissa smiled, the expression transforming her young face. Then I guess we saved each other, in a way. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small envelope. This is for you. Something to remember us by. Inside was a photograph Marissa had asked Williams to print. A simple shot of Ray holding Michael, both of them bathed in sunlight from the Safe House window. The baby was awake, looking up at Ray with complete trust, while Ray gazed down at him with an expression of protective wonder. When Michael's older, I'll tell him about the brave ex-con who found him and kept him safe. Marissa promised. About how sometimes the people society has written off are the ones most capable of extraordinary kindness. Ray carefully tucked the photo into his wallet, beside the faded school picture of Mikey he'd carried through his time in prison. Two children, connected by circumstance and choice, reminders of what had been lost and what might still be possible. The goodbye at the airport was brief but emotional. Ray held Michael one last time, whispering promises that the world had good people in it, that he would be safe and loved. Marissa embraced Ray tightly, this young woman who had come to trust him with her life and her child's. "Keep in touch," she said. "Let us know how Mikey's baseball game goes." "I will," Ray promised. "And send pictures. I want to see this little guy grow up happy." As Ray watched them disappear through security, Williams at their side, he felt both loss and completion. The chapter was ending, but the story continued. Marissa and Michael toward safety and new beginnings, Ray toward reconciliation and redemption. Outside the airport, Ray checked his phone. A text from Elena. "David knows you'll be at the game. He's okay with it." Mikey is excited. And beneath it, a photo of his son in a baseball uniform. Gap-toothed smile bright beneath his cap. A mitt clutched proudly in his hand. Ray stared at the image for a long moment, then began the journey home. Not to isolation this time, but to possibility. The possibility that one unexpected act of kindness, one choice to help rather than turn away, could lead not just to saving another's child, but to finding his way back to his own. 3 weeks later, Ray sat on aluminum bleachers under a bright spring sky, watching as Mikey stepped up to the plate for his first at-bat of the season. Elena and David sat a few feet away, giving Ray space while acknowledging his presence. As Mikey swung, connecting solidly with the ball, Ray rose to his feet and cheered. His son's head turned at the sound, eyes finding Ray's face. A moment of recognition, of hesitation, and then the brightest smile Ray had seen in years. Just like the smile in the photograph Marissa had sent yesterday of Michael in his aunt's sunny California garden, reaching toward the camera with absolute trust that the world around him was safe, that the people in it could be counted on, that second chances were not just possible, but real. An ex-con had found an abandoned baby, never imagining it would lead him to his own lost child. But sometimes, Ray realized as Mikey waved from first base, the most unexpected paths lead exactly where we need to go.